The rain didn't just fall. It soaked the cobbled streets of Bristol like a blanket of grief, as if the sky itself mourned Thomas Ellington's passing. I arrived at the cemetery in a long black coat, the fabric heavy from the drizzle. Dozens of guests were already gathered beneath black umbrellas, their eyes cast downward. Silence clung to the air like fog. Thomas was a kind man, beloved, steady. I had known him from university days, though life had scattered us in different directions over the years. Still, when I received the call about his untimely death, I knew I had to be there. It was the least I could do. Amid the sea of mourners stood Eleanor Ellington, Thomas's widow. Her figure was still, a sculpture of sorrow carved in dark velvet. Her black veil concealed her expression, but I could feel her eyes watching me as I approached. The service moved slowly. A priest spoke softly about love, memory, and eternity. People laid white lilies on the polished oak coffin as it was lowered into the ground. Eleanor didn't cry. Not once. Her silence was louder than any wail. I waited a respectful distance as guests began to disperse. Then she looked at me. Through that thin veil, her eyes pierced straight into mine. Calm but strange. Like she had something left to say. She walked over, graceful despite the mud soaking her heels. Her gloved hand touched my arm. "Don't leave yet," she said, voice barely a whisper. I nodded, surprised. She turned away, not offering explanation, only the instruction. And so I stayed. An hour later, the cemetery was empty. Only she and I remained, standing between the ancient tombstones as clouds thickened above. "Come with me," she said again. And like a man hypnotized, I followed. We got into her car, a black Jaguar, sleek and polished despite the storm. We didn't speak on the drive, only the sound of wipers beating back the rain and tires slipping on wet asphalt filled the void. She took me through the winding hills on the edge of Bristol, far from the city's heart. After 20 minutes, we arrived at a manor house, Greystone Hall. Stone walls, ivy-covered, tall windows staring out like ancient eyes. It stood isolated, surrounded by fog and time. "This is where Thomas died," she said, stepping out without waiting for my reaction. A chill ran through me, though not from the rain. Inside, the house smelled of wood polish and something older, like secrets and history. Every room was perfectly arranged, yet untouched. Too untouched. Almost staged. She led me to the parlor, where a single photograph stood on the fireplace mantel. Thomas, smiling. But something was odd. In the background of the photo was the same parlor, but with someone else in it, someone I couldn't quite make out. Eleanor noticed me staring. She stepped closer and said quietly, "That picture was taken 3 days before he died." The clock on the wall chimed, for slow, echoing strikes. And then she added, almost to herself, "He told me you'd understand." Greystone Hall seemed to breathe with its own lungs. Every floorboard whispered. The wind scratched at the windows like it had something to say. I followed Eleanor through the quiet corridors, feeling each step echo against the tall ceilings and cold stone walls. She paused outside a thick oak door at the end of the west wing. It was locked, heavy, its brass handle worn, as if gripped by anxious hands too many times. "This was Thomas's study," she said. "No one's been in since he died. Not even me." I looked at her, uncertain. But she pulled a key from a chain around her neck, slid it into the lock, and with a slow turn, the door groaned open. The scent hit first, old paper, wood smoke, and something faintly metallic. Inside, the room was dim, curtains drawn, the fireplace cold. Books lined every wall. Ancient tomes, journals, collections of letters, maps. On the desk rested a half-burned candle and an open notebook. The chair behind it still pulled slightly out, as if Thomas had just risen. Eleanor stepped back. He was obsessed with something before he died. Maps, names, symbols. He wouldn't sleep. He'd lock himself in here for hours. I approached the desk, fingers brushing over the worn leather. The notebook was filled with inked sketches, symbols I didn't recognize, alongside what looked like coordinates. Notes in the margins read, "Not the beginning, only the door." She knows. She always has. Ask Jonathan. Jonathan. I asked aloud. Eleanor shook her head. I don't know who that is. He never mentioned anyone by that name to me. I turned the page. More maps. One marked in red ink, the Somerset countryside. A circle drawn around a tiny, labeled Dunmere Wood. Have you been there? I asked. No, she replied, lowering her voice. But he did. Alone. Last week. The day before it happened. I stood in silence, staring at the page, trying to make sense of it. Why did you want me to stay, Eleanor? I asked finally. She looked at me, eyes wide, fragile. Because he said if anything happened to him, I was to give this to you. She handed me an envelope. Sealed. My name written in Thomas's familiar handwriting. My throat tightened as I broke the wax and pulled out the letter inside. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. They're watching. They're listening. You have to go to Dunmere Wood. Only you. There was no signature. Just a sketch on the back, a strange symbol that matched one in the notebook. A circle, intersected by a triangle, and 3 dots beneath. I felt the temperature shift. Eleanor took a step back, rubbing her arms. This house feels wrong now, she whispered. Before I could answer, a loud knock echoed through the hall. Not from the front door. From upstairs. We both froze. There's no one else here, she said quietly. Another knock. Then the faint sound of something dragging across the floor above. I tucked the letter into my coat, closing the notebook and slipping it under my arm. Whatever Thomas had discovered, it hadn't died with him. I turned to Eleanor. Don't follow me, I said. And then I climbed the stairs. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I ascended. The upper landing was cloaked in shadow, despite it being mid-afternoon. Cold air gathered there, still and unmoving, like breath held too long. I followed the faint dragging sound to the far end of the corridor. A door was ajar, the brass handle gently swaying. I pushed it open slowly. It was a guest room. Dust lingered in the air. Nothing appeared disturbed, yet the dragging sound had stopped the moment I entered. I scanned the room. An old wardrobe, its mirror cracked. A rocking chair near the window. A dressing table covered in neatly folded sheets. And on the wall, a collection of framed photographs. Mostly old family portraits, faded with time. One photo stood out. Not for its content, but for its clarity. It was recent. Thomas stood in the center of a forest, the same one from the map. Dunmere Wood. His expression was unreadable. Behind him, half shrouded by trees, was a man in a dark coat. His face blurred, not by motion, but deliberately smeared, as though someone had dragged a finger across it. I leaned closer. The edge of the photo bore a timestamp, 5:03 p.m., 2 days before Thomas died. I took the frame down and turned it over. A scribble on the back read, "He followed me. Said he knew. Said Eleanor would lie." I gripped the photo tighter. My breath clouded the mirror. That's when I noticed something behind me. A reflection. A tall figure in the hallway. I spun around, heart thudding. The corridor was empty. Yet the scent of tobacco lingered faintly in the air, something Thomas never smoked. Someone had been there. I rushed back downstairs. Eleanor stood at the bottom of the staircase, pale, clutching the notebook to her chest. "You saw something," she said. Not a question. A knowing. I handed her the photograph. "Do you know who this is?" She stared. "That's Dunmere. He took that the day he came back shaken. He said he heard whispering, that he wasn't alone." Her voice faltered. I thought it was grief, that he was breaking under it. "What did he mean, that you'd lie?" I asked. She didn't answer at first. Her eyes moved to the window, where rain had begun tapping against the glass. "There were things I didn't tell him," she said. "About this house. About what happened here before we moved in. But it wasn't lying. It was protection." I didn't press her. "Not yet." Instead, I opened the notebook again. Flipping to the back, I found another name scrawled beneath the same triangle symbol. Jonathan Blackwell. Curator. The Langford Archive. Eleanor saw it and nodded slowly. That's in Bath. I've heard of it. It houses private collections, things no public museum would take. I made a decision. Whatever answers Thomas had found, whatever darkness he had stirred, they were linked to this Jonathan Blackwell and to Dunmere Wood. I placed the notebook, letter, and photograph into my satchel. I need to speak to him, I said. Eleanor didn't argue. She only said, be careful who you trust. Some doors shouldn't be opened. As I stepped into the rain and out to my car, I looked back at the hall. A figure stood at the upper window watching. It wasn't Eleanor, and I didn't recognize the face. Bath greeted me with pale skies and slick cobblestones. The rain had followed me south, but here it was gentler, almost rhythmic. I found the Langford Archive tucked away behind an ivy-covered stone wall, nestled between a chapel and an old bookshop. There were no signs on the gate, only a rusted plaque with the words, "Private collections by appointment only." I rang the bell. After a pause, the door opened just enough to reveal an older man with gray eyes and a scholar's frown. He wore a thick jumper and a long scarf that trailed behind him like a ribbon of smoke. "Jonathan Blackwell?" I asked. "Yes," he said, scanning me with quiet suspicion. "You're late. I expected you yesterday. I didn't know I was coming until this morning." He gave me a look but stepped aside. "You'd best come in then." Inside, the archive was like stepping into a forgotten wing of a museum. Shelves stacked to the ceiling. Dust clung to everything. Folders, artifacts, crumbling books bound in leather. It smelled of candle wax and damp stone. "I was a friend of Thomas Greer," I said. "I know who you are," Blackwell replied. "He spoke of you. Said you'd come if something happened." He led me down a narrow corridor to a locked cabinet. With a ring of tarnished keys, he opened it and removed a thin wooden box. Inside were several documents, all marked with a curious red wax seal, a triangle with a circle in the center. "This symbol," I said, tracing it. "It was in his journal." Blackwell nodded gravely. "It's a mark of the Whispering Order. Or so the records say. It's old. Older than this country. They weren't a cult, exactly. More of a society. They believed certain places, lakes, woods, ruins, were thresholds. Not metaphorical ones. Actual thresholds. Between our world and something else." He laid out several photographs. One caught my eye immediately. Larkspur Lake. Still. Beautiful. Empty. And yet, in the far background, partially submerged in the trees, was a dark structure. Almost like a small chapel, but wrong somehow. Crooked. As if the land itself had grown around it in rejection. "They called it the Listening Chapel," Blackwell said. "It appears on no map, but it's in every account tied to the order." "And what happened to them?" He hesitated. "They vanished. All of them. One by one. Some walked into the woods and never returned. Others were found changed. Unable to speak. Others had drawn symbols all over their walls. Same triangle. Same circle." A quiet shiver moved through me. "Thomas went back there, didn't he?" I asked. "He did," Blackwell said. "He contacted me 6 weeks ago. Said he'd found something near the waterline. A stone tablet. And a name. One that kept appearing in his dreams. Yours." I didn't respond. Blackwell pulled out a final item. A wax cylinder, like those used in old phonographs. "He left this with me. Said to give it to you only if you came. Said not to play it unless you were alone." I took the cylinder with shaking hands. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. I could feel it now, something ancient moving in the edges of this story. Following Thomas's footsteps was leading me somewhere deeper than I had imagined. "You knew him better than anyone," Blackwell said. "You'll understand what it means." As I stepped back out into the gray afternoon, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The journal, the photograph, the voices Thomas had heard. And now, a message meant only for me. Back in my room at the guest house, the air felt oddly still. Outside, the clouds hung low and heavy over Bath's Georgian rooftops. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and placed the wax cylinder on the table. It looked fragile, time-worn, a relic from another age. I found an old phonograph in the corner, part of the room's decor. Miraculously, it worked. The needle scratched slightly as it touched the surface, and then a crackle, a hum, and Thomas's voice, thin and wavering, as though speaking through fog. "If you're hearing this, it means I've gone too far," he said. I sat perfectly still. I didn't mean to. I only wanted to see it again. The listening chapel. It calls to you. It doesn't use words, not at first. You'll hear it in water, in silence, in your own dreams. You think you're imagining it, but you're not. The order called it the listening place, a gateway to what they call the other echo. The recording hissed, and for a moment I thought it had ended. But Thomas continued. "I brought something back with me," he whispered. "It's not physical. It clings, follows. There are moments when I forget what day it is. I wake in strange places. I hear my own voice speaking to me, but it's not mine." The hairs on my arms stood on end. "You have to go there, to the lake. Not because you can stop it, I don't think it can be stopped. But you need to know what it is. You need to see what I saw. The truth is beneath the chapel, not inside it. That's where they kept it. The stone choir." Another crackle. Then something chilling. "You're already dreaming of it, aren't you?" I stepped away from the machine. Because I had. Twice since coming to Larkspur, I'd woken gasping, the taste of damp stone in my mouth, with the image of a circular room carved from earth and bone. Men standing in a ring, wearing masks, chanting without sound. And always, the triangle with the circle in the center. I switched off the phonograph. Outside, the rain had stopped. But the silence felt different now, as though something was listening. I turned over Thomas's journal once more. There were notes in the back I hadn't seen before. A hand-drawn map, showing a path from the lake's north bank to what looked like a collapsed structure, half buried in the hillside. The listening chapel. There was no doubt now. I would have to go back to Larkspur. Alone. That night, I barely slept. Shadows pressed against the windows. I kept thinking of Thomas's words. "You have to see what I saw." By morning, the decision was made. I packed light. Left a note with the guest housekeeper in case I didn't return. Told no one else. As I boarded the train north, I caught my reflection in the carriage window. I looked tired, haunted, but I wasn't afraid. Not exactly. Just drawn. Larkspur felt different this time. The quaint village charm had worn thin. The streets were quieter than before. Even the locals, once cordial and chatty, now seemed distant. I caught wary glances as I passed, whispers behind drawn curtains. Something had changed since my last visit. Or perhaps I had. The path to the lake was slick with rain. The sky hung low, gray and unblinking. I followed the hand-drawn map from Thomas's journal, stepping over twisted roots and ducking beneath overgrown branches. It took nearly an hour to reach the place marked chapel, though no chapel stood in sight. Just the remains of a foundation. Stone swallowed by moss. A half-buried archway jutting from the earth, like the ribs of a buried giant. This had to be it. I hesitated. The air here felt wrong, still but heavy, like the pause between lightning and thunder. I took a breath and stepped beneath the arch. The earth sloped down into darkness. I lit my torch and followed the path. Damp stone walls closed in around me. Water dripped in the distance, echoing like distant footsteps. Further in, the narrow tunnel widened into a chamber. Circular, just like in my dreams. And there, carved into the floor, was the symbol, a perfect triangle with a circle at its center. My torch flickered. The walls were lined with niches, each holding wax figures draped in decaying robes. Their heads tilted at strange angles as if listening, watching. One still had glass eyes, clouded and lifeless, that seemed to follow me as I moved. In the center of the room, a stone altar. Upon it, a slab of polished black, obsidian, perhaps, reflecting my torchlight like water. I stepped closer. Etched around the altar were words in Latin. I recognized only fragments. Echo. Vigilate. Iterum.
Echo. Watch.
Again. I reached out and touched the stone. The chamber hummed. Not a sound. Exactly. More like the absence of sound collapsing inwards. My ears rang. The floor beneath me pulsed like a heartbeat. And then, from the darkness beyond the torch's reach, came a whisper. Faint, but familiar. Why did you come back? I turned, torch raised. No one. Only the figures in the niches, motionless. Who are you? I whispered back. Silence. Then another voice, deeper, distorted, like many speaking at once. You open the door. I backed away. My heel caught on a stone. I stumbled, landed hard, the torch rolling from my hand. Shadows danced madly across the chamber walls. The whispering grew louder, layered.
Chant-like.
I scrambled to my feet and seized the torch. Something moved. Not in front of me, behind my eyes. A flicker. A memory not mine. I saw Thomas, standing where I stood now, eyes wide with terror. I saw others. A ring of figures, chanting in silence. A woman in black watching from a distance, her hands folded over a book bound in skin. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Silence again. I was alone. The whispers gone. The torch steady. I turned and fled the way I had come, heart hammering. The air grew lighter as I reached the surface, and when I stepped back into the gray daylight, I nearly collapsed with relief. But I knew. It had seen me, and now it knew me. I looked back once. Just once. The archway was gone, as if it had never been there at all. Back in London, the city's familiar noise did little to settle my nerves. I moved through my flat like a shadow, windows drawn, lights low. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams bled into waking. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the chapel again, the altar, the whispers, the eyes in the stone. I stopped answering phone calls. Emails piled up. My agent, Sarah, left a message urging me to get in touch. Said a woman had visited the office asking for me by name. She'd left no contact, just a folded piece of parchment with one line written in red ink. Don't leave yet. It had been Abigail's last words at the funeral. I returned the call immediately. Sarah said the woman was older, dressed in black with a green brooch shaped like a serpent. No name. No appointment. She'd spoken quietly, calmly, like someone who knew things before they were said. My hands shook as I hung up. That night, just after 3, the doorbell rang. I froze. It rang again. 2 short presses. A rhythm I recognized, from childhood, from memories half forgotten. My mother used to knock like that when coming home late. A private code. But she had died years ago. I crept to the door, peered through the spy hole. Abigail. Alive. She stood motionless on the front step, the same black coat from the funeral, but soaked through. Rain matted her silver hair to her scalp. Her eyes met mine through the glass. She didn't blink. I opened the door. Come in. She didn't move. I shouldn't have brought you into this, she said. Her voice was brittle, like frost over glass. I stepped aside. She entered slowly, her boots leaving wet prints on the floor. She removed her coat, but not the gloves, and sat stiffly on the edge of the armchair as if afraid to touch anything. I was warned, she said. Long ago. By Thomas. He made me promise never to let it reach London. Never to let it follow us back. I sat opposite her, hands clasped tight, my throat dry. Follow. I said. She nodded. The chapel isn't just a ruin. It's a gate. Once opened, it remembers you. It dreams with you. I thought of the whispers, the flickers of memory, the ring of robed figures. She continued. Thomas studied it obsessively, thought he could contain it. But he was wrong. It fed on him, changed him. The last months of his life, he spoke in riddles, woke screaming at dawn, said it knew his name. She looked at me then, her face pale and lined with grief. He told me you might come, that you'd be drawn to it. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin, worn notebook. The cover was charred at one corner. She handed it to me. This was his final journal. It's yours now. I opened it. The first page was blank. The second was filled with sketches, the triangle symbol, the altar, a map of Larkspur from above. But the third page stopped me cold. A charcoal sketch.
Of me.
Standing in the chapel. I snapped it shut. What is it? I asked. What does it want? Abigail looked toward the window. The rain had stopped. The city was silent. It doesn't want, she said quietly. It waits. Before I could speak again, she rose. I can't stay. I was never supposed to see you. They'll know now.
Who?
She paused at the door. The ones who listen. She stepped out into the street, and this time, I did not follow. I locked the door, drew every curtain, placed the journal beneath the bed. But when I turned out the lights, a single whisper lingered in the dark.
Echo.
It was my own voice. I didn't sleep after Abigail left. The whisper had lodged itself deep in my mind, repeating with each breath I took. It was more than just sound. It was memory. My own voice, speaking a name I hadn't known I'd ever said before.
Echo.
By morning, the journal felt radioactive beneath my bed. I pulled it out cautiously, setting it on the kitchen table. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in narrow bands, illuminating the cover, cracked leather, stitched by hand, with the initials TF pressed into the corner. Thomas Fairburn. I opened it again. More sketches filled the pages. Phrases written in sharp, angular script. Not a threshold, a hinge. Chapel teeth. Names etched in bone. The more I read, the more the writing seemed to shift tone, lucid at first, then panicked. Desperate. Then came the maps. At first, just Larkspur. Roads, fields, the river that wound like a dark vein. Then layers were added, underground tunnels, collapsed wells, broken lines leading away from the chapel. One symbol repeated in each version of the map, a circle crossed by a vertical line. It appeared near the same spot every time, beneath the northern woods. Beside a note written in a trembling hand, buried where the stone speaks. I had to see it. I booked the earliest train out of London and arrived in Larkspur under grey skies. The village looked different now. Not changed, just exposed. As if everything false had been peeled away. The pub windows were shuttered. The chapel path overgrown again. I didn't stop at the inn. I walked straight into the woods. The northern forest was denser, quieter than I remembered. Tree trunks leaned as if listening. A carpet of wet leaves muffled my steps. I followed the map, comparing the curves of paths and the spread of clearings. It took over an hour, but then I found it. A flat circle of stones, almost entirely covered in moss, barely distinguishable from the earth around it. At its center, a smooth slab of granite with something etched so shallow it could barely be seen. I rubbed it clean with my sleeve. The same triangle symbol, but there was something else. A word beneath it. Amaranth. The moment I said it aloud, the ground trembled. Only slightly, but enough. I fell back, heart racing. Around the stone, the moss shifted. No, it moved, as if disturbed from beneath. Then it settled again. I waited. Nothing happened. The moment passed. But something was different. I sensed it the way animals sense storms, low in the stomach, beneath instinct. I marked the spot with a piece of red cloth from my coat, tying it to the nearest branch, then took photographs of everything, the stone, the markings, the trees around it. Back in the village, I booked a room at a different inn. The owner, a gaunt man with ink-stained hands, asked no questions and gave me the attic. That night, I reviewed the photographs. In one of them, taken as I had turned back from the stone, there was something else. Behind the trees, a figure, standing perfectly still. No face visible, just a silhouette in the mist. Watching. I blinked, trying to dismiss it as a trick of the light. A reflection, maybe, but I knew better. The journal lay open beside me. The last page I'd read contained a drawing of the same forest clearing. Except in Thomas's version, the figure wasn't in the distance. It was standing on the stone, arms raised, face turned skyward, mouth open. Beneath it, One final line had been written in frantic strokes. Once named, it does not forget. I dreamt of the stone that night. In the dream, the forest breathed. Not with wind, but with something deeper, older, like the slow exhale of a buried beast. The stone pulsed with heat beneath my hands. And the name echoed again. Not just Amaranth, but Echo. As if the two were joined, part of a cycle I had stepped into without permission. I woke up just before dawn, drenched in sweat. My hands were shaking. I needed answers. Something more than whispers in my head and marks on stone. If Thomas Fairburn had known what was buried beneath Larkspur, maybe someone else had too. The local records office was in a red-bricked building near the high street, half forgotten and humid inside. The woman behind the desk, Margaret, was polite but wary, like someone used to people asking for things they shouldn't have. "Fairburn," she said, peering at the register. "There's not much left of him. His property burned down, most of it lost. But we've a donation box from the estate, unsorted papers, books, odds and ends." She brought out a cardboard crate from the back room, dust rising as it hit the table. Inside were loose pages, brittle photographs, and a battered tape recorder. I sifted through slowly, afraid to breathe too deeply in case the whole thing disintegrated. Then I found it. A photograph of the stone, clearer than mine, taken from above in daylight. Around it were candles, all melted to the base. And something else, carved into the stone that hadn't been in my photograph. A mirror. Not a real one, but a shape, a rectangle with ornate corners, etched in with purpose. The tape recorder clicked in my hand as I pressed play. A man's voice. Tired.
Come.
"This is Fairburn. Entry 17. The stone responds when the word is spoken. But it's not the word itself, it's recognition. Like calling a dog that knows its name. The mirror isn't physical. It's conceptual. The shape marks the place where it shows itself. I've begun to see things I can't account for. Faces in windows. Water that doesn't reflect the way it should. If I disappear, burn this tape. Burn everything." The recording stopped with a hiss. I sat frozen. The library window beside me gave a view of the village pond, still and dark beneath the overcast sky. A swan drifted across it, lazy and unbothered. But the water, something was wrong. I leaned closer. My reflection didn't move. It stared back at me, my face, but not. The mouth was too wide, the eyes slightly off-center. And then it smiled. Not a twitch, not a trick of the light. It smiled. I jerked back, heart pounding. Margaret looked up from her desk. "Are you all right?" I nodded, forcing a breath. "I need a copy of this photo," I said. That night, I didn't go back to the inn. I walked. Through the fields, past the chapel, into the woods again. The cloth I'd tied was still there. But the stone, it was uncovered now, as if the moss had been peeled back carefully, deliberately. And there, beside it, someone had placed a mirror. An actual one. Old, silver-backed, leaning against a rock. I crouched, staring into it. Nothing. Just trees. My own face. But behind me, in the glass, a flicker. Movement. I turned. Nothing there. But when I looked back, the figure had stepped closer. Still just a shadow in the reflection. But closer now. Watching. My breath fogged the mirror. And on that fog, without lifting a hand, words began to form. "You called." I stepped back. My heel caught a root and I fell, hitting the ground hard. The stone pulsed once beneath me. Just once. Like a warning. I left the woods in silence, the mirror still leaning there, the figure fixed in its place. My thoughts felt like broken threads, tangled and useless. At the inn, I locked the door, pushed the dresser against it, and sat with the journal open on the bed. I traced the name one more time. Amaranth. My fingers ached. My ears rang with silence too loud to bear. Outside the window, something shifted in the mist. And inside my head, a whisper. Not mine. Not Abigail's. A third voice. Older. "You saw me. Now I see you." The next morning, The village was unusually quiet, as if the earth itself had taken a breath and held it. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I walked past the bakery, where the smell of flour no longer felt comforting, past the chapel, where the door was ajar but no one sat inside. Even the swan on the pond had gone, leaving a ripple that refused to settle. I went to Abigail's grave. The soil looked freshly turned. The flowers I had placed were gone, replaced with something else. A shard of glass. From a mirror. I bent to pick it up and pricked my thumb. Blood welled up, red and sharp against the pale morning light. When it dripped onto the shard, the reflection twisted. For a split second I saw her. Abigail. But not as I had last seen her. Not soft, not peaceful. Her eyes were wide. Her mouth open. Screaming. I dropped the shard and stepped back. It landed face down. Blood smeared across its back. Someone had placed it there. Not the wind. Not chance.
They wanted me to see.
I returned to the woods one last time. The path felt different now. Not overgrown, but worn, as if many feet had passed this way in the night. The trees leaned inward, branches tangled, light fading with every step. The stone waited. The mirror beside it had cracked. A long, jagged line cut through the center. But the figure in the glass was still there. Closer now. Clearer. It was Abigail, or what looked like her. But her mouth moved wrong. Her eyes were too still. And she didn't blink. When I turned around, no one was there. But her voice spoke from the mirror. You followed the thread, just like he did. Fairburn. I whispered, even though I hadn't meant to. The image shifted. The forest in the mirror gave way to a room, dark, firelit, paper strewn across a desk. Then a man, slumped forward, blood across his temple. Thomas Fairburn. A notebook beside him. Words scrawled in haste. The stone doesn't grant. It remembers. And it brings back what should stay gone. The voice returned. You open the door. Now you must step through. The stone began to hum beneath my feet. I turned to run. Branches lashed out. Roots grabbed my ankles. I fell hard, face to soil. The air tasted like iron and ash. The trees groaned, not with wind, but with breath, breathing me in. Then I heard it. A laugh.
Soft.
Familiar. I looked up, and Abigail was there, standing beside the stone, wearing the same coat she had worn that final day. But her eyes, they weren't hers. They were hollow, like windows to something vast and cold behind them. You promised, she said. I tried to speak, but no words came. You said you wouldn't leave me. I shook my head. You said always. She reached out her hand. I couldn't move. The forest held me like a mouth about to close. You saw me, she whispered. Now I see you. The mirror cracked again. And again. Until it shattered. The forest fell silent. When I came to, it was night. The stone was still. The mirror gone. And Abigail gone too. I walked back to the village, hollowed out, unsure what I had left behind, or what had come back with me. At the inn, I found a letter pushed under my door. No name, just a message. It doesn't end here. You saw her. Others will too. Watch the mirrors. I looked up. The wardrobe had a mirror on the front, and in it, something moved behind me. Not a reflection. Not mine.